We on? Let's go.
Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of the OoruLabs podcast from Bengaluru. Ever complain how bad our cities are, how bad your commute is? You'll get to hear from people who are working to solve these problems in their own way. This is your weekly soapbox for urban sustainability. So do not forget to like, subscribe, and share these videos. Check out the entire podcast library and profiles of the guests on the website podcast.oorulabs.com. I am Satya Shankaran with Nirav Kodolikar, and today we have a special guest, Venkateshwar Rao Navanasi, but we call him Bikey Venki. He's popularly known in the bicycling circuit for contributing a lot in terms of getting people on a bicycle. He has organized races around the Bangalore Amateur Racing. That is the event he conducts, and he's been doing it completely voluntarily as well with a bunch of volunteers. We'd like to touch upon some of these issues today around how the cycling community has been growing in Bengaluru over the past decade that he has been at it, and how the structure of cycling as a recreational tool has produced an interest, a long term interest in picking up cycling, and it has had a lot of downwind benefits to the commute scene as well. One of the key things around cycling community is cycle racing, long distance cycling, and commute cycling. These are three aspects of cycling that we see being very popular. And I think a good question to start with to Venki would be around this. So, welcome to the show, Venki.
Thank you, Satya. It's a pleasure having being on this show.
And Venki also produces his own podcast called the Working Athlete Podcast. And do check it out. I'll link his show in the show notes. He's done more than 140 episodes, so he's a pro at this. And he has had guests, and I have been fortunate enough also to be a guest on his show talking about cycling. So I'll link that as well. So now it's my turn to ask him how he feels about this. So the question we'll start off with Venki is: do you think we will be able to produce a cyclist who might be able to compete in the Tour de France kind of event at international levels? How far do you think we are from that?
I think we will be able to, but we are a decade at least away from such thing. Um, over a period of time, we have seen growth in terms of the level of competition, level of the individual riders themselves. But I don't see that happening immediately. But it will definitely happen. At least a decade.
At least a decade. And we have, you have been in this scene for more than a decade now. You race yourself, you ride a lot, you ride with people who participate. Tell me about the types of events that happen around Bengaluru for people who may not be aware of how much cycling has grown over the past decade or so. Where do you think it started? What were the initial scene like when you came into this? How much of work had been happening, and where has it gone? How have you seen it grow?
When I came to Bangalore first time, BBCH was already quite active. That is something that started around 2008, and I came to Bangalore around the end of 2010. And that is an event that happened every month without fail. And it was just basically a couple of friends showing up and saying, we will do this at this particular time, and basically timing each other and publishing results and stuff like that. And now you see that platform. It is without any doubt the best racing platform for anyone in India, right? So when BBCH race happens, riders from all around the country come in and take part. Uh, so that kind of gives it much more, improves its value that much more. So the more the competition, the better the competition, the higher the value of the event also, right? So the standards that it has set contributed to that increase in prestige over a period of time. Now it is simply the best racing platform around. And around that time also is when the brevet scene was,
Mm.
developing. And now you see Bangalore brevets, Bangalore runners, Bangalore brevets is what it is called, I think, is one of the best in the country in organizing one of the toughest racing series, I mean, brevet series all around India, to be honest. So the kind of events they organize, the kind of routes they take, much more challenging. It's not just highways going out and doing 600 kilometers or something like that. It is the challenging routes that they chart, covering, for example, all the climbs around South India and stuff like that. It is really, really challenging, and they bring out the best in that kind of riding as well, the brevet riding scene. So these are the couple of platforms that were existing when I entered Bangalore cycling scene. um, and
So
they
just before we move forward,
Yeah.
for an audience, the racing versus the brevet, the distinction.
Yeah. So racing, we typically are focused on shorter events. It can be a time trial of 20 kilometers to 30 kilometers to 40 kilometers. Time trialing in the sense a person will ride as fast as he can on a set course, and that the person with the least time covering the course in the least time will be the winner, right? And there will be mass start races which will be again on a set course. It can be 100 kilometers, 50 kilometers. The longest race we have in Bangalore with BBCH is 161 kilometers. Bangalore Classic is what we
Mm.
call, right? And it can be a climbing race like, finishing on top of Nandi. But these are all, shorter distances. But when it comes to brevets, these are longer endurance events. They are not races, but they are time bound. You are supposed to complete either there is a brevet series called super randomer series, which starts with 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers and 600 kilometers. If you are able to complete these rides in a stretch, in a series, you are awarded super randomer title. Although these are not races, these are time bound. Each of these rides have time cutoffs, as in you have to finish this ride in a certain amount of time. 200 kilometers might be 20 hours. I'm not too sure about the time cutoffs, but they're very relaxed time cuts. If you are able to roughly ride at 15 kilometers per hour or something like that, you should be able to complete the ride. But completing a ride like that, like say 600 or 1000, requires a different kind of mindset when compared to racing. In racing, you are dealing with a short period of time, and the intensity of suffering is a lot different than while you are doing a longer endurance ride. Yeah, these two were quite active when I came into the picture. They were up and coming, and it is great to see that nothing actually, uh, the trajectory of
Mm.
growth with them actually kept on going like that, right?
Mm.
So the number of people racing has increased dramatically. The number of riders doing these brevet rides, the longer distance rides, have has increased in the same rate. And it is really heartening to see both these organizations doing a great job in keeping that flag flying high. And it's actually, I feel very proud to be actually contributing a little towards that scene, be it volunteering at bbch when I'm not actually racing, and also bringing in a similar racing platform like Bangalore Amateur Racing, which we started in 2013, and this year we have completed 10 years with bar.
Mm.
It is, this is something, it is, I consider Bangalore Amateur Racing as a kind of gateway drug for cycle racing, because I tell people, I entice people with a cake at the end of the race, right? So that's the drug I'm giving them, say, to experience racing. I say, we when we started Bangalore Amateur Racing, we said, we don't want to keep, we want to keep it free, but don't want to keep it free, right? Because people don't value things that come for free. So we said, okay, 20 rupees is the registration, right? And that's how that continued until we faced an issue where 20 rupees, finding that change has become a bit of an issue. So we made it 50 bucks, right?
Mhm.
And so that is how it kind of continues even today. 50 bucks is the registration, and there are no prizes, there are no medals, no completion certificates, and nothing like that. The podium winners will get the first piece of cake,
Mm.
and the same cake is given to everyone else as well, right? That has been the tradition with bar Bangalore Amateur Racing. And that these are the small things that keep the community prospering and growing, right? So and events like Tour of Nilgiris, Tour of Karnataka, the Great Malnad Challenge,
Mm.
all these also contribute a lot towards the people having a goal, that they can aspire to and train towards, right? So all these events, be it breves, be it the bbch races, bar races, be it these multi-day events like Tour of Nilgiris, Tour of Karnataka, the Great Malnad Challenge, all these actually become aspirational events that get people out the door and
Mm.
ride, right? Train towards. When I signed up, for example, when I signed up for a Tour of Nilgiris for the
Mm.
first time in 2011,
Mm.
that is something that captivated my imagination, right? That, thinking of riding 800 kilometers, 900 kilometers in 7 days
Mm.
through the hills in Ooty, through the Nilgiris, has kind of, captivated my imagination so much and also scared me so much that
Mm.
I ended up riding some 11,000 kilometers in 6 months leading up to that event, and lost 10 kgs in the process,
Mhm.
so that I could actually, when I went to the event, it was not as hard as I imagined it to be, because I ridden and trained so much for it, because it inspired me so much. So these are the things, having these events, be it bbch, bar, all, or tfn, and all these events are really important to for the cyclists, uh,
Mm.
to kind of act as a um, aspirational events to train for and ride towards.
It's amazing how it motivates people. It's helps people set goals.
Yeah.
It helps you get out, and these are organized in a way that it lets you participate as well, regardless of how much experience you have. You can get out there, like you said, get a piece of the cake as well, and get to participate. And I found that the community is so encouraging that even if you don't have prior experience, you can just jump in there and ask questions, and they help you out, and you guys help others out in saying it doesn't matter what kind of a bicycle you have, come and try it out, come and let's try it. Nirav, you've been racing in some of these BBCH and other things.
Before coming to these races, as someone who has moved to Bangalore very recently, and I'm from Goa for the viewers, one thing I've always known about Bangalore over the years is that Bangalore has a very strong racing culture, and this is something that was always known and taken as like common knowledge over the years. Actually, with that regard, I want to ask Venki that. How would you go about replicating a similar model or replicating the same culture elsewhere? Because I see that that's what's required to really foster a culture of racing, to foster a culture of competitive events that aren't necessarily restricted to one particular category of cycling. Because if you look, as you said, if you look at Bangalore, we have competitive racing, we have brevets as well. But if you compare that to any other city, I mean, historically, now we might see that Goa also has a strong racing culture. I see a few cities that are either only racing or only brevets or nothing at all. So, in your opinion, how would you go about replicating the same culture elsewhere?
If you look at it, even in Bangalore, it is just a few individuals coming together and starting it, right? There
Yeah.
is no big organization behind any of this. It is one or two guys kickstarting it, and in case of Bangalore, in case of say BBCH or Bangalore Randoneers, uh, an organization of volunteers forming around it, right? Or around what is already kickstarted by one or two individuals. And that is what is needed to replicate it anywhere else, because there are no government bodies that are going to do it for us. It is not a priority. There are no sports bodies that are inclined to cater to the amateurs. There are going to be some, one of events that are centered around nationals, to kind of cater to select riders for nationals. There will be state selections, there will be district selections. In most cases it's just state selections that are going to organize one event per year, right? So that is not going to help anyone at all. If you need strong cyclists, strong culture, you need events that are very consistent and defined in the calendar throughout. Then the more you race, the better you become, right? The more you train, the better you become. And that is only possible, that can be only replicated if a few people from each of these major cities or towns putting their hands up and saying, I will start this, right? So you see that happening now in Goa with Equipe Goa, Shasti Riders, and all these guys coming together and saying, what are they doing? They're just organizing those events regularly. And you see the effect. The grassroots level riders are coming up, and the riders are coming to BBCH and actually ending up in the podium. Those things will not be possible unless there is talent unearthed through these events that are organized there, right? So that is the only thing that, that's the only way I see that we can replicate the same thing across various towns or cities in India. Same thing happening in Hyderabad as well. One
Mhm.
person has taken the bar model, and uh, Pasha is doing it at HRC. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
one or two people putting their hand up and saying, we are doing this for the community.
Yeah. Actually, one small clarification is that actually only raced only one BBCH event, and this was in 2017. Coming back to the racing culture in Bangalore, and this was in 2017 when I moved for my undergrad. I took part in what was a criterium. I'm just like, okay, it's another French word. I'm on my cycle. I'll take part in it. And this was me coming from an endurance background, and seriously did not know what I was getting into. So, for the viewers, a criterium is essentially a very short format, high intensity race that's very different from a really long format endurance race that I was used to. And yeah, that's when I realized what racing actually was.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's a different ballgame altogether.
One of the things I wanted to touch upon is now we are seeing a renewed interest. There's a huge amount of people who are now getting on bicycles and all that. And sports has typically been a good way to explore cities and countries. With a lot of, I've personally traveled places and experienced them because of sporting events that happen there. It's one of the ways you could explore cities through food, you could explore through history, you could explore through many things, and sports is one way with large events at a very professional level being conducted across Europe and other countries like the Tour de France, the Giro de Italia, and there are so many Tour of Swiss. There are so many events that are happening, and increasingly many cities are taking cycling as a very serious thing. And the advantage is, unlike an Olympic infrastructure, so unless it is the track racing in a velodrome, most of these happen on open roads. Most of these the routes go through cities, they go through common roads. Of course, they are gentrified and they are kept safe for people to ride. A lot of people are now exploring, and there has been studies which have found that there has been, because you're not putting up specialized infrastructure and you're only using temporary blocks and facilities, it has increased the incomes in cities by up to 200%. It has benefited hospitality industries. Many people come, you've seen this in the marathons, whether it is the Mumbai marathon or the Delhi marathon. When people travel, when they come to the Bengaluru marathon, they come here, the whole city has a vibe to it. There is involvement from people. Of course, roads are blocked and people are angry, but for one day, for one half of the morning, please put up with it. Cycling incidentally goes outside into the boondocks as well, so you're safe. You may just go through the city, but it has catalyzed urban rejuvenation, an interest in active, healthy lifestyles among people. It has built team spirits. Where do you see potential for cities like Bengaluru?
I cannot, at least for now, I cannot see, cycling going the way the marathons and running events are going,
Mm.
right? For one thing, you can't really uh, deal with thousand cyclists going on the roads in or racing on the roads in the same way as you can organize a race of thousands or 10,000 people even in a running event, right? So that is simply not possible when it comes to cycling. We have seen a couple of events organized in the center of the city with when the Bangalore Vodafone cyclothon
Mm, mm,
was organized, and it was done pretty well, but it lasted just 2 years. If a big organization taking initiative and managing permissions and everything is not able to sustain it, you cannot do anything about it. Someone like us or bbch will not be able to move the mountains that are needed to move to make that thing happen. So there is a constraint in terms of logistics, and in terms of the number of people that a cycling event can accommodate and stuff like that. It is really difficult to see unless there is a culture that is there in Europe, where even in Europe there are very few places like Belgium where a locality is comes together, and all the businesses in that area come together to support a race
mm,
almost every week through summer. Their summers
mhm,
are you know admittedly short, but
mm,
those 3-4 months, every week, that locality, all the shops in that locality, all the businesses in the locality come together to support a race, right? The longer criteriums and stuff like that, the races that organize, the roads are closed,
mm,
and all the viewers and on the track, all the shops benefit by people coming to watch the race. The businesses are built around that, operating around that, those events. So that kind of culture is not there, and I don't
Mm.
see that happening in Bangalore or anywhere in India, for to be honest. And
Mm.
I'm not holding my breath to to see a day like that.
But I want to explore that. Let's say today you pointed this out earlier in your comments that the government led events like the nationals and others are too few and far between, and every sport has only prospered when they have a private league which has been run separately, whether it is cricket or football or even if it is a kabaddi as a sport. They only become popular when businesses stand behind it, when a private league at scale is able to organize multiple events in smaller scales. Like you said, it can't be a mass start with 20,000 people. It's unmanageable. Even the pro peloton is not that big. So
200 people
Yeah.
200,
maximum.
300, yeah, so that's
Yeah.
how it ends up. And last week's BBCH apparently hit 200, so we are at the pro peloton size already, right? It's just about then filtering out and weeding out and doing this. There are two three aspects. One is, let's talk about the league and how that can happen. There are funding requirements. It's not easy to sustain these kind of events. Huge sponsorships are required. Massive amounts of support is required, and we should use this opportunity to call out to people to support these things, right? And that's what we are expecting to do, is catalyze these things for the larger good, because they have the culture of cycling is not magically going to appear, right? I mean, you've seen it. What kind of a support can not organizing again another bureaucratic entity which puts more spokes in the wheel than you need? How can private leagues flourish?
There is a little bit of you, if on the private entity part, to if you break it down to bare bones, right? To organize an event, you don't need too many resources,
Hmm.
right? For take an example for the bar events, the Bangalore
Hmm.
amateur racing events. All I need is a set of bib numbers,
Hmm.
right? And uh, and I and tags that I to tie those bib numbers to the cycles, and a couple of stopwatches, right? And that is maybe a couple of notepads to note down the bib numbers and the timings, right? So this is the equipment, these are all the resources that are needed to organize a bare bones event. Okay. And funnily enough, after 10 years, uh, I've retired the notepads, the two notepads that I've been using for the last 10 years. I just changed them this year to mark the 10th year anniversary,
New
right?
capital investment, one notebook.
Exactly. No, not one. I bought three,
Okay.
two for regular use, one as a backup,
Hmm.
right? So this is the investment you need. So that is the kind of bare bones, to organize a simple show up, race hard, eat cake, and go home.
Hmm.
That is what you need. You don't need big resources. On the other hand, if you want an event to be professionally organized, right? Communicating everything, rules around it, and making sure the roads are safe. There are support vehicles to kind of, there are support cars behind you, there are pilot vehicles in front of you, and all these uh, safety measures in place, right? It needs a lot more organization, and that is where Bangalore Bicycling Championships, BBCH, does a great job of doing it, right? So that needs a lot more resources, lot more planning, and that is where, and these guys are able to cover these costs through the registration fee, right? uh, so right now I think it is 700 or 800 bucks. Not as much as the running event tickets as well. It's still lesser than those 1500 1500 2000 rupee running event charges. These are still in below 1000 bucks, right? That is you know you should be able to do it in those kind of, because numbers are not large as well. And uh, to the point I'm trying to make is, you don't need huge resources to make things happen, right? But you need people who are willing to put in the work to show up every month and organize these events on a consistent basis. So that is what you would need. There are you don't need big large IPL like setup to make these things happen on a grander scale. You just need a smaller organization, even with good planning and ability to execute, will be able to do this.
Will that still be sufficient to take this to the next level? Let's go back and say, if you still need talent to be spotted and identified and move to the pro peloton levels, go to the UCS circuit levels, and the training that is required, the amount of uh, effort that is required, and at some point it is always a prestige to be able to pull off one Tour de India kind of an event here as well, right? So those are ambitious goals. For I understand what you're saying. At a grassroots level, the BBCH are models that can scale quickly, faster, get communities faster engaged, and start doing something. But is that something going to get us? And not that I really need to raise the pro peloton level, but
No, that's a very good
you
question.
interviewed people, right?
No,
You
that's
talk
a
to people.
that is a very good question. See, when you, it is all I think it is all a numbers game, right?
Hmm.
Uh, why do you see so many good cyclists coming out of, say, Belgium or
Hmm.
France? Because they have been doing this for hundreds of years,
Hmm.
right? I mean, maybe not hundreds of years, but just definitely multiple decades, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
More than hundreds of 100 years, right?
Hmm.
That, and what is it that they are doing? They are having not just one city or one town, having a few races. It is that every city, every small village, every town, every city will have various smaller racing events and bigger racing events happening, and throughout their season, right? The season is limited by their
Yeah,
lousy
summer.
winters,
Yeah.
right? And that is what is needed now. We see some racing in Bangalore and some
Mhm.
racing in Goa, a little bit in Hyderabad, and beyond that, where do we see the races? Maybe sporadically some event will happen in Delhi, maybe some event will happen in Mumbai and Pune, right? That is it. Where are the We are a country with so many states, so many big cities. If we see so many big towns,
Mm,
if if these events are there, if the cycling is imagine a bar or a BBCH in, say, 100 places, 100.
mm,
Just imagine the uh, number of people, that talent that could come out of that, right? uh,
mm,
a Joel Sundaram has come out, like within 1 year of cycling, he has been identified because there is something called BBCH here. And that can happen only if these things are there across India, at scale, right?
mm.
In scale, not in the bigger the events, but on multiple locations.
Very
so that
interesting.
so that more and more people can be part of it, and there are the probability of unearthing these gems in the rocks is that much more. Just take an example of talent coming out of Goa now, right?
Mm,
These people have started organizing races only couple of years back, but already you can see a real raw talent coming out of there, right? It will take a few more years for it to develop and become stronger, but you can see that the effect of giving raw talent a chance, right? A platform. Those platforms need to come up everywhere, and once you see the number, it's a number game. The more
mm, mm,
chances you give, the the because for a person to do well at at a pro level, there are so many factors,
mm,
right? It's not just the talent. If if you are the strongest cyclist, you don't end up in a pro peloton, right? There are so many factors. When did you start? What is the did you manage to find the right contract at the right time, and all these things, lot of other things. Because if you see the Europe, it's all full of people with 300 plus FTPs. You don't see everyone there on the pro peloton, right? It's not just the FTP that is needed. There are so many factors that are, that needs to align to, so many stars need to align to, get you there. But how many those 300 plus, 350 plus FTPs can you bring?
mm.
The, once you have all these, events and platforms across India coming up, to give this raw talent a chance to flourish, only then can this thing can happen to a higher level.
It's a very useful point. When we think of scale, to go back and answer Nero's question, was you are saying it's not about the amount of money you pump in and make grand events. It's about the small bars that can happen in 100 different places, which have
Absolutely.
low friction of low barrier to start. It just needs people commitment, like you said earlier. How do we find these people? How do we build a network of these people in? And you can do it seasonal. There can be 100 excuses. My place is hilly, my place is hot, my place is wet. We can find seasons where, right, you can follow that and say you don't have to race all the year round. You don't have to do the BBCH kind of every month one race. There could, what kind of strategy? So let's think through that. Let's say there are people from across the country listening in, cyclists who are passionate, who have been doing some things. How do they set up a bar kind of thing? What could they? And of course, expertise is available. I can assume they can always call. I'll put your link in the show notes. People can call you up and discuss and say, how do we quick start? What advice would you have? How do we get started in doing this scale of small things in 100 different places, getting the talent out? How do we do that?
I mean, people have always been reaching out, and have
Hmm.
always been open about sharing, what can be done. See, yeah, like I said, all you need is a couple of stopwatches and a couple of notepads and a couple of pens. Don't forget the pens because you need them to write, right?
And the
And
cake.
And I was just going to
cake
say
is
that.
not, no one is going to expect a cake, right? It is a bonus thing. Don't
Yeah.
worry about the cake also, right? And you need a road that is going up and going, up and down. That is it, and we have plenty of that,
Yeah, we make a lot
right?
of them. Hmm.
We make a lot of them, even with potholes, without potholes, we make a lot of them, right? So just get started with organizing a simple time trial, right?
Hmm.
You start off people with 1 minute gaps or 30-second gaps, and start timing them. Go to the other side of the road and start timing the end timings, and you have it. Nowadays there are, with the apps like Strava, you don't even need to do the math yourself, right? Everyone, if is using Strava, It is there for everyone to see, and it will give you the rankings as well, right? It
Mm.
is so simple. It is not at all hard to organize a simple race. That's it. You don't need to start with organizing a 100-kilometer road race.
Mm.
Start with organizing a simple time trial, and you know
Mm.
if go a little bit further and say team time trial of 2 or 3 people, so that they can practice riding together, riding in pace line, so that their skills also improve, right?
Mm.
These are very a couple of simple events that anyone can start with. And then you can think of mass start races and stuff like that once you get used to this, right? Once people are well versed with these kind of things, you can start, when people are used to riding in pace lines and all this, you can start thinking about road races and mass start races.
That's so well put, because I think, I mean, even Satya could probably attest to this. As somebody who works in the realm of urban governance and wants to further effective urban governance, I wish that some of the racing enthusiasm rubbed off on those who commute to work on a cycle, and those who commute to work on a cycle also tried racing, also tried competitive events, so that cycling as a whole sort of permeates more into our social fabric as something that is normal. That's something that you don't bat an eye at. If somebody decides to cycle to work, that's normal. If somebody is racing on the weekends, that's also normal. So then, if we can get to that point, that cycling becomes normal and not something out of the ordinary, and seeing somebody in lycra like it really shouldn't matter, then maybe hopefully we can start promoting effective talent and just managing that at different levels through different leagues, as you said, throughout the country. And that's sort of like the ultimate hope, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when you say normal, when anything starts, it is going to be abnormal, right?
Yeah.
When I started commuting back in 2008, everyone in my apartment was looking like, "What are you going to go to office on a cycle?"
My
I
God.
was in Hyderabad at that time, going to I was working in high tech city, and uh, what are you going to high tech city on a cycle? So I said, yeah. I didn't care to explain anything, but after a few months, the same people who were like surprised and were like jaw dropped, and I was like, "Hmm, that's nice, you're doing well." So they people come around, you do what is needed, and you keep doing, they will it becomes normal as you keep doing it, is what my point is.
Yeah.
Now if you see in a city like Bangalore, it is normal because you there are so many people doing it, right?
Yeah.
That is the only way to make things normal. Keep doing it often, and let people see and learn.
There are challenges to that as well, right? I mean, there are lots of things that we can say is wrong with the city to help us cycle around. And you and the people you are familiar with have all used bicycles in the toughest of conditions. There's always a controversy around, like, this is not the perfect condition for me to cycle. I need this, I need that, I need all these things to line up, and the stars, everything to line up for me to go to the corner on a bicycle. So how do you overcome? What have you seen any interesting stories around that? Because your personal journey also is useful, because for you it has become what cycle then it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, it is like a and egg story, it
Hmm.
becomes, right? Unless the conditions are perfect, I won't start, right? Or then, unless there are enough people doing it, the conditions won't improve,
Correct.
right? So unless there are enough people using the cycles, on the roads, we can't really ask for any infrastructure. But in a country like ours, asking for any infrastructure for anything is a big sin. But you know
Mm.
but unless more of us do it, we can't really ask for any infrastructure. So I am of the viewpoint that just do it
Mm.
however you can, and things will follow eventually with the work that you guys are doing on the policy end of things. you know Things will come eventually.
I think we do need that support on a brave set of people who are capable of navigating what is apparently considered dangerous streets. We are putting together maps of saying, don't you don't have to go on the main road. Try and find side roads which are calmer and try and navigate. So in the beginning you won't know that because your muscle memory is to take the streets you have been taking when you go on a motor vehicle, and those are usually larger streets, and then you start discovering the side roads, and always the side roads will be a mystery when you go to some other place in the city. So a map of navigating that is something that we're putting together. I'll put a link in the show notes where people can contribute saying, hey, you don't have to go on this main road. There are these side road which lead you to the same place on the other side. So these are some of the techniques that are there, but our mental makeup, our risk appetite, and how we choose our routes and how we keep ourselves safe is what matters. And the stigma is another big thing that we face. I don't know what your story is on that, because we do have a stigma around only poor people cycle. Rich people should only be on a very fancy bicycle which will be ridden on that time. A TT bike is from uh, those X companies is what you need, and that's only a bicycle. Everything else is not. Carrying a grocery on your bicycle is looked down upon. Those still exist in communities. I don't want to deny that, but it could be misconception. It could be culture. I don't know what we chalk it down to, and how do you overcome that?
No, it is definitely there. It is not that it is just in our minds. It is definitely there. The that kind of just imagine a milkman.
Mhm.
How often do you see a milkman on a cycle right now?
They have
Right?
switched to scooters and autos.
They're switched to scooters and autos. So that is what culturally we see as the progression, right?
Mhm.
So for someone like you and me, who can probably afford a car using a cycle, is like a puzzling thing for many people, because that is not what progression is. You are retrograding, right? You are regressing instead of progressing. What are you doing? You are out of your mind, right? So that is always there. But in this case, I think we have to do what is right for us, and what we feel is right. That is the only way. I mean, I cannot when my health is getting affected, the neighbor is not going to come and take care of me, right? I have to take care of my own health. And that is the primary reason I got on a bicycle,
Mhm.
even for commute, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if it is my viewpoint is saving environment, that is my prerogative, right?
Mhm.
I am not answerable to anyone else other than my own self. What am I doing to contribute to the environment? So this is my small tiny way of doing it. That we have to see why we are doing it, and if the reasons are right, we keep on going with it. That's the only way I can see, because I cannot think of what others are thinking about me and stop living, right? That applies to when it comes to cycling as well. That looking down upon is there, but you know we have to keep moving.
On that wonderful note, Venki, it's been a wonderful chat with you on how the scene is in terms of how we can scale the culture and the community of cycling with the recreational piece. And the beautiful advice there is, let's look at many mini bars, the Bangalore amateur racing equivalent, not the mini bar. with the alcohol in it
Th-
that you can
those
do in the evening.
those are plenty,
Yeah,
thousands and lakhs.
correct. And that can be the reward after the bar race. You can have your bar mini access to your mini bar. But that's useful, right? Without scale, trying to make a big deal out of the league can be too early unless there is a scale across cities and not just in Bengaluru alone. Take the big 5, 10 cities where it can start with the volunteers, and that's the call out I think we should make is more people start doing this and telling the story of how many places it's already. Maybe it's happening in some city or town that we don't know, and we need to be able to uh, get a common platform where we hear about it, tell the story, put that together, and say, well, at least 10 cities I know are actually doing it beyond my circle, and maybe they can comment on this and say that what they are doing so that we can get in touch with them and see how we can promote those stories as well going forward. And with that, thank you for coming on the show, Venki. And it was always a pleasure speaking with you. I'd like to pick up more on this and see how we can help make this change going forward. I feel that the culture of cycling is going to have its trickle down benefits into commute. And unless a huge set of people, it's the same volume game in the city as
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
right? So instead of nitpicking on the 10 people who are riding, if we had 10 lakh people who are riding, it would be far more crowded and people would see, the complaint is, where are these cyclists? So here they are, the same volume game is, I think, and in India with so much volumes, like you say, I,
absolutely.
right? So the volume is what will tell the story. With the adversities that we face in commute, I think we should just go forward. On that note, I'd like to ask people to like, subscribe, and share, and tell these stories and watch them and share it with your friends, so we can have Venki back again talking about some more things. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you for having me.
See you all next week.